name's Jeep Barnett. I'm a game programmer, and sometimes when I get bored, I make board games, because why not? Make card games, dice games, just randomly try stuff. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The first board game that really hooked me was Don't Break the Ice. Me and my brother found it at a yard sale. We bought it for $1 because we just had a little cash on hand. And first, we were playing it. I mean, we were too old for this game. We were maybe 12 and 14 at the time or something like that. So we're doing little hits on the ice, trying not to knock anything over. And then we started kind of developing this play style where we try to slam it as hard as we could with the hammers and be like, can we win the game in a single hit? We just kept coming up with all these different rules variations, trying to figure out anything we could do with the game to make it different. It had this really interesting physicality to it. There's these sort of plastic springs that hold everything in place. You can, hit things just the right way or just the right corner and how they twist and fall. I don't know, it's just kind of unlike any game I played where, like roll and move games, you pick up and you move your pieces, but there's nothing about how you actually physically move your body that goes into that. And so I just found it really interesting how you could just have your kind of own style of play that really played into the game and made it different each time. The thing that I really love about board games, especially a bunch of the ones I've been playing lately, there's this thing that happens where I have an idea in my head of what I want to do, and that translates into a physical movement in my hands or on the table. And sometimes that's something I'm communicating that to myself, but when you have a competitive game against somebody, using those physical components, you're sort of comparing a school of thought or a philosophy about what is the right way to play this game. And so, if it's an Ascension turn and I'm laying out my cards, I'm laying them out in a way so that somebody else who sees those understands what I'm trying to do with those cards. And so it becomes this sort of dexterous communication of ideas. I mean, the way the Portal board game started was kind of accidentally. I was, just laying awake at night, and I was thinking about this idea of a jigsaw puzzle where I was playing with a lot of jigsaw puzzles at the time for reasons I don't know, because I don't really like jigsaw puzzles, but I had this thought where I was like, if you had a jigsaw puzzle that didn't have flat edges, if the right side was more puzzle pieces that connected to the left side, the top edge connected to the bottom edge, it would make it a little bit harder in that you wouldn't know where the border is, but also you'd kind of be able to create this amorphous, amoeba kind of puzzle shape, because every piece kind of connects to every piece. So I was thinking about that, and I was talking to one of my artist friends, and he was like, that's a cool idea. He was making this poster at the time of all the different Earths in the multiverse of an Aperture thing. It's from advertisement where they have all these Earths and every single one is different. So he had this poster with all these repeating Earths on it. And I was like, oh yeah, repeating pattern like that is really cool for puzzles, because then you kind of get lost as to which pieces are which. And so I was like, oh, we could do a two-sided puzzle, because I don't know, we were just kind of riffing on ideas. So we were talking about this two-sided puzzle with all these interchangeable pieces, and somebody wandered by and was like, you know what, if you just added some rules to that, you could make that a game. You have these two-sided pieces, and on each piece is a different Earth, and each Earth has some different ability. So it was just this conversation that we started talking about, and I was like, well, this was probably on a Thursday, and so over the weekend I was like, well, I'll print out some Earths, and then I'll just try and write something down and come up with something. And at the end of the week, we played a couple games, and it turned out to be really fun. We had this, again, I'm really into this physical aspect of board games, this immediate thing where when you pick up a puzzle piece and flip it over and decide where you want to stick it to, each turn you're kind of changing the shape of the multiverse. It has this really cool physical feel to it. Every time you make a move, just doing that, whether there's rules or not, is just this really interesting action where you're communicating what Earth am I deciding to destroy, and what Earth am I going to create, and where am I going to put it. And that action communicates to the other players what your intent is, and they have to think about, oh, what is he trying to do next? Is he trying to get there and get this thing? Is he trying to go over here and get this thing? And so you sort of have this internal monologue of what you're trying to accomplish on the board, and everybody else has their own goals as well, but they're also trying to stop you if it looks like you're in the lead. It just evolved over time. We kept making little changes and tweaks to the rules. The core of what the game is still kind of what that very first prototype was, and it's always kind of been this strategy game. And so players are trying to collect the most points. At one time it was money, eventually it became cake as we kind of rethemed stuff. This is sort of the other part of the game that I find really interesting. It has this this weird greed aspect to it where as soon as you know you're in the lead, your goal is to end the game, because if the game ends and you're in the lead, you won. But to end the game, what you have to do is kill off your own test subjects. And in the process of killing off your own test subjects, you're sort of losing power on the board. And so if you have this greedy moment where you're like, oh, I think I can kill them all off, and you start getting rid of your test subjects, suddenly somebody else might take the lead, and now you don't have enough power to actually make a comeback and prevent them from doing something. And so there's just this tipping point of figuring out when you want to exit the game and watching other people and making sure that they aren't having that exact same thought. There's just this dynamic between the players of trying to sort of solve this puzzle of how to win and prevent everybody else from winning at the same time. It is a little bit like Munchkin. With Munchkin, I have trouble with, it sometimes feels like this perpetual thing that never has an end because everybody's always trying to take the top guy down. So with this game, I built in some specific mechanics that try to make it so that there's sort of this attrition that causes the game to end no matter what. And actually a player came up with this where I added a way that you could destroy somebody else's points. And somebody was like, oh, when I destroy these points, I want to like incinerate them, just like in Portal, throw them in the incinerator. And so the final game actually ships with a little cardboard piece that sits in the box itself. And so you throw their points back in the box, and those points are gone forever. You can't actually get them back. And so the attrition is that at a certain point, nobody can earn any more points, and the game just ends. Usually it ends before that, but there's kind of a guaranteed end mechanic. Where I start when I first try to come up with a game. I mean, sort of like I was talking about, it's sort of an accident, but it's also kind of this obsession where I'll just have this weird thought in my head about kind of like a game system where I'm like, you know, if two people had some dice and they were trying to, you know, roll the highest number in, you know, some amount of time or some amount of whatever, like how would I try to optimize that? And so I'll sort of think about what strategy I would use in those situations, and is there a dominating strategy that everybody would try to do this, and so it's not that interesting if everybody has the exact same idea. Like, it'll keep me up at night, and just whenever I have a moment of like quiet thought, I'll just be thinking about this thing. And so what I end up doing is I start either just writing down, or like on my iPod, I'll just start typing out like, okay, if player X has this strategy where he tries to do this, what is his score going to look like over the course of the game? I just keep kind of typing out or writing out numbers until I start to see that there's several like parallel strategies. And when I have something like that, it feels like it's actually a pretty interesting game, at least in my head. Like, that doesn't mean it'll be a good game when I actually play it. And so then what I do is I start talking to other people about it, like, you know, I have this idea for a game, do you want to just sit down and try this? And usually it'll be me, like, just with some index cards really quickly, like writing a couple things out, like, this card does this card does this, or these dice do that. And just, it's really more like scooting pieces of paper around the table and just saying, well, if you do this, I do this, and if you do that, I do that. And you kind of keep playing with it, and then you start kind of simplifying, well, like, what are the core elements of this that make sense? So that's a big piece of how I start making a game. The other piece is usually, I tend to play a lot of games I haven't played. And what I mean is, when I go to a board game party, if there's a game I haven't played, that's the game I want to play. I'm just like, what is this game? I want to see it. It's like always surprising, like how many really good ideas out there, like, and how many, actual board game designers are really smart in the way they do things, really clever with the stuff they come up with. But like, sometimes I'll see these little flaws where I'm like, I love Bang, but the thing I hate about Bang is that the person who dies first has to sit for 30 minutes and wait for the game to finish and has nothing else they can do. So with like the Portal board game, the thing that I built into the game was, as soon as any player is eliminated, the game is over. That is the end of the game. So there's never a point where one person is sitting out. And so that's sort of how I'll evolve an idea over time. Just something where it's like, I can't not work on it. I just have to work on it. I feel obsessed to actually do something and to understand what this thing is that I'm thinking about. The thing I find very interesting about developing tabletop games is it's a lot harder than making video games. And I think part of that is that I'm more of a game programmer, and I don't have a lot of experience in tabletop games. But I think there's also some stuff inherent in the medium that I'm still trying to understand, where there's too many elements in a game, you start to lose track of what are all the possibilities. And so that's the difference that I really find between the two, is that I like making really simplified video games, but board games have to be even simpler than that. They have to be really careful about sort of this balance between complexity and what players are able to understand in a single thought, I guess, or in a single moment.